Now, regular listeners and viewers will know that for some weeks now, I've been waging my Just Stop Hoyle campaign, a campaign to stop Speaker Lindsay Hoyle charging round the world at great expense for reasons that we can't quite work out. He chalked up, as you will know, £250,000 worth of parliamentary expenses, jet-setting around the world in just 2 years, staying at expensive hotels, sometimes 900 quid a night, going out for 300 quid meals, hiring chauffeur-driven limousines for thousands of pounds, flying first and business class, just costing us a fortune, you know, £23,000 to go to the Cayman Islands for 2 or 3 days and so on and so forth. When he went to Montserrat in the Caribbean, he chartered a private jet. So, we've been saying that this guy's he won't answer any of our questions, of course, and no MP has got the guts to bring this up as an issue, even though it's a national scandal. MPs are terrified of the Speaker because if they get on the wrong side of the Speaker, they don't get called to speak in the House, and thereby their careers disappear without trace, even though nearly all their careers disappear without trace anyway, quite deservedly so. But they're terrified of the Speaker, so nobody has raised what should be a scandalous issue. Now, when we have a Speaker, you know, the man who's in charge of the House of Commons, he is, by the way, he's only an MP. He's an MP for Chorley up in the north. But, you know, he gets this fabulous apartments in the House of Commons, in the Westminster Palace, view across the Thames. He spent £7 million having that done up when he moved in. Our money, by the way. Beautiful view. Supposed to have the best views in London. Plus £36,000 on a portrait of him hanging in the corridors, so on and so on. When we have the Speaker of the House spending our money, taxpayers' money, on such an epic scale, can it be that much of a surprise that we get the Labour MP for Coventry North West, someone called Taiwo Owatemi, claiming £900, 900 quid, nearly 1,000, to cover the cost of keeping her cockapoo dog, her pet dog Bella, at her second home in London. You won't be surprised to hear that, of course, as always with these disgusting cases of ligging, freeloading at our expense, it's always, oh, it's within the rules. Well, change the bloody rules then. It should not be within the rules that she can legitimately charge taxpayers 900 quid to look after her dog. But 900 quid she claimed and 900 quid she got. Dan Jarvis, a Labour minister, says he will now be making representations to IPSA, that's the organisation that sort of looks after MPs' expenses in the House and standards in the House of Commons. Dan Jarvis says he'll be asking them to look at changing the second home dog rule. Well, one would hope, wouldn't one? But I bet you nothing happens. These people never pursue this sort of thing very vigorously because they like their little perks, and their little perks are basically getting money by ripping us off. It's a disgrace. I'm sick of these entitled people living on the public purse. We should all rise up as one and say no more. Let's talk to social and political commentator James Melville. Hi, James.
Evening, Kevin.
Well, on this case, right, Taiwo Owatemi claiming £900 to cover the cost of keeping her cockapoo Bella at her second home in London. You and I have spoken at some length about the massive amounts of money that the Speaker, Sir Lindsay Hoyle, has ploughed through on alleged fact-finding missions to glamorous places all over the world, entailing him staying in very expensive hotels, going out for very expensive meals, hiring very expensive chauffeur-driven limousines, sometimes even chartering a private jet, so on and so forth. We've spoken of that. When we have a system whereby this guy is allowed to live high on the hog at our expense, I suppose in the end we shouldn't be that surprised if you get a backbencher charging us 900 quid to look after her dog. But these people, her, the rest of the MPs, Lindsay Hoyle, of all people who should have known better, haven't learnt anything from the 2009 MPs' expenses scandal, have they? They've still got their snouts in the trough.
Yeah, the problem's never gone away. It's still there. I mean, I was reading the other day that I think it's £180 million over a 3-year span was spent on MPs' expenses. I mean, some of that you can justify in terms of office costs and the rest of it, but you cannot justify a lot of the other stuff. Like, for instance, we still have this ridiculous thing whereby we're going through a cost of living crisis where energy bills are going through the roof, even though the Labour government said they're going to cut energy bills, but that hasn't happened. One of many lies that they said before the election. But we're still paying through the roof for energy bills, but we're also paying for MP second homes energy bills. I mean, that sort of thing should stop. And then it gets worse, things like cockapoos. Lovely dog, by the way.
Yeah, sure. Nothing wrong with cockapoos. I like
temperaments, but we're paying for it. And so you've got Lindsay Hoyle, who should know better, setting some standards in Parliament, but not standards for himself in terms of ligging around the world, living like some sort of James Bond character, doing fact-finding missions around the world in Parliament, staying in 5-star hotels and hiring private jets. It's ridiculous. And there's many others as well. Now, I think we're at a point, considering what's happening with our politics, whereby we've got the worst politicians at exactly the worst time, and public confidence is on the floor. It doesn't matter whether you're red, you're blue, you're yellow, whatever, in terms of your political beliefs, they're all as bad as each other. And we have Ed Davey today strutting around in a hobby horse. And so we've now got a situation whereby the public have had enough, and therefore we also need a case at some point where I think the UK has its own version of Doge. And first of all, it should be cleaning up the mess in politics through MPs' expenses, second jobs, the second homes expenses are attached with that as well, and also the freebies and donations culture as well. We need root and branch to sort this out, because ultimately, as you said earlier, we're the ones who are paying for it. And during the cost of living crisis, when we're basically struggling to make ends meet with high prices and also the highest tax burden since records began, and yet we're still paying for this sort of nonsense to happen, it's completely unacceptable.
Yeah, and as we discussed before, the frustrating impotence of my Just Stop Hoyle campaign, is just infuriating, because this is something that, look, maybe, I don't really believe it, but Hoyle might have sort of reams of a very good excuse to justify all of his travel. But are we going to hear his excuses? No, because not a single MP will complain about him. Not a single MP will raise this issue. And the fact of the matter is they don't want to upset the Speaker. The Speaker wants to jet around the world. That costs us a load of money. And then you get people like Ms. Owatemi claiming 900 quid to cover the cost of looking after a dog. And there'll be many, many more claims like this still going on in the House of Ill Repute that we call the House of Commons. We need to do something about this, and we need to do something quite fast. But can we get any of our politicians to get behind bringing the House of Commons into line, into order? No, because they want to continue to have their snouts in the trough. They want to continue to fund their lifestyles at our expense. It's a disgrace, and I'm getting more and more annoyed. But what on earth can we do about it if we can't get a single representative of the people to bring this issue up?
That's it. We actually do need one politician to take this on and be sort of the chief campaigner on this, because it is completely unacceptable. So right now we've got a Labour government, I never thought I'd say this, we've got a Labour government that's punishing pensioners, winter fuel allowance removal, and also, incredibly, punishing the disabled, possibly pushing 250,000 disabled into poverty, and also punishing carers with cuts to welfare. So this is going on, whereby they're cutting the finances of the most vulnerable. Austerity on steroids, and yet our politicians are carrying on that they've got this self-entitled way of behaving where they can put through expenses on our expense for 5-star living, private jets, 5-star hotels, and cockapoos, and many, many other things. It's totally unacceptable. And I think we need to keep on going on this one, Kevin. But what we do need is we need some MP out there to make it their mission to go, right, I'm going to campaign on this over the whole term of the Parliament and beyond. Because ultimately, one of the reasons why politics is on the floor in terms of public confidence is because of all of this stuff. Yeah. And the juxtaposition is there. Right now, we've 4 years of a cost of living crisis. We're now getting a Labour government that's putting austerity against the most vulnerable, and meanwhile spaffing it away in stupid directions like carbon capture machines. But more importantly, it is the diametric opposite contrast between punishing the poor and the vulnerable and that lot in the House of Disrepute or Ill Repute who are carrying on, legging all these expenses on our expense. It has to stop.
Yeah, and you know what would be good? You know, again, we are trapped within waves and cycles of frustrating impotence here, because no one will complain about Lindsay Hoyle, or no one should raise, and somebody should raise that issue. How does he justify all of this? This costs the taxpayer a lot of money. How does he justify it? And also, you've got to think about the mindset of these MPs. I don't know Taiwo Owatemi. I'm sure she's a very fine MP for Coventry North West. But think about her mindset. Wouldn't a decent MP, a representative of the people, say, you know, it's wrong for me to claim 900 quid to look after my dog? I mean, she should have self-censored with this. This is just wrong. You, me, and every taxpayer in Britain shouldn't be paying for Taiwo's dog, and she should realise that, and she should not put this claim in. But they all do, don't they?
But this is making it even worse, because we're facing the highest tax burden since records began. You know, it's all the stealth taxes. We're getting farmers that are being punished with inheritance tax. We're getting the vulnerable that are being targeted with awful austerity policies that really they're going to struggle to avoid slipping into poverty because of that. But there's a mood within the country right now that whether it's the cost of living in terms of essentials like food and fuel and so on, whether it's also the cost of taxation crisis, where the public are getting taxed on absolutely everything through the roof. They're not getting return on that investment either, because our public services are diminishing and our infrastructures are crumbling. And so people are really feeling it. And, you know, we get conversations every single day, Kevin, you know, as we go and speak to any punter out there, they're saying the same things, that nothing's working. We're paying through the roof. People are hanging on. They want to keep their businesses afloat and provide for their kids. But at the moment, it's a struggle to see through it. And yet, on the other side of it, we get that lot in the House of Commons putting through expenses for five-star living, private jets and cockapoos and the rest of it. It's completely unacceptable. And this is why we do need something different. And I don't know where that difference comes from. You know, Labour went in on false advertising saying they were going to clean up the mess in politics and sort out all the corruption and the cronyism and all the stuff that basically we're still complaining about now. Nothing's changed. And in fact, in some ways, it's even worse under the Labour government, because they did this holier-than-thou virtue contrick that they were going to be the great saviours of integrity and clean up the mess, and yet looking at Labour from the freebie scandal onwards, nothing has changed, and in some ways it's got a hell of a lot worse, because I never thought I would say this, that Labour governments are punishing the most poor in society, and yet they're doing nothing about the MPs and their sort of self-entitled expenses scandal as well.
Yeah, and just as a last point, the MPs are about to earn about, I think it's about £94,000 a year. They are entitled to some expenses. A lot of them have to travel around. That's fair enough. I suppose to an extent they're entitled to a second home wherever they have to live. But their dogs, jet setting around the world, I don't think we need this. As you say, people are struggling in the cost of living crisis, and I don't think they want to see these MPs living on the high on the hog at taxpayers' expense.